was complete.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How many times the congregation was completely reduced to tears.
Wow.
And how I mean, I'm talking about Holy Spirit power, or we would call it Holy Ghost power. And so on the day after my consecration, I was seated at the Cathedral of St. Philip, and it was a baptismal liturgy, and the whole time, and it was the baptism of Philip, of the eunuch.
Yes.
Of the Ethiopian eunuch, and I'm sitting there and I'm talking to God on the way to this liturgy, because the dean is sort of he's sort of a barbarian when it comes to these kinds of things, and he's not easy, as they would say in the Caribbean. And so I'm sitting there thinking, I've got my new mitre. I'm thinking, do I want to be decent and in order, or do I want to follow the Spirit as I have followed it for the last 10 years? And so I made the decision to baptize, to say that after we baptized all those scheduled to be baptized. And at first it was just a pregnant silence. And then two people came forward. One, an older man, black man, who came to be baptized. I asked him his name. He told me his name. I said, "Do you accept Jesus Christ?" He said, "I do." I baptized him. And then a teenage girl came forward. She was the daughter of friends of ours who came down from New York to be a part of the weekend. Well, she walked all the way up the cathedral, man, just as bold as sin, walked all the way up. I asked her the question. Her mother and father seemed to be dazed about the whole thing. I baptized the child. Now, here's where it gets interesting. About a week, 10 days later, maybe 2 weeks, the girl writes me a letter. And she says, "I'm so happy I'm baptized by my new friend, the new Bishop of Atlanta. We go to church in Brooklyn, and I kept asking to be baptized, and they told me they didn't have a class, they didn't have anybody, but I wanted to be baptized." Can you hear that? A teenage girl saying that? She said, "I wanted to be baptized. And now I'm baptized because of my new friend." So that was God answering my query, which was, I will never not do that. I will never not ask people, is there anyone here who is not baptized and who desires to be baptized? I will never not say those words as long as I'm around.
Well, listen, I am reminded of the song, "There is plenty good room."
Plenty good room in my Father's house.
And in the Episcopal liturgy, for the spontaneous discernment of the work of the Holy Spirit.
Ordered spontaneity is what we call it at St. Paul. Ordered spontaneity. It is not chaotic, it is ordered. It is actually deeply theologically sound practice.
Yes.
If we believe that the liturgy is anything really.
Right.
If we believe that.
Right. There are a lot of people who are not Episcopalians who don't believe that liturgy makes that room.
Oh, I'm sure. And some of them are even, some of them aren't Episcopalians, and some of them are, and some of them who are actually teach seminary, and which is heinous as far as I'm concerned.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, let us get to that.
All right, but one more anecdote. My friend Vernon Jordan used to say to me, I said, "Vernon, you have to come to St. John's Lafayette Square to get your dose of the Holy Spirit." And he said, the Holy Spirit knocks on the door and y'all don't let him in.
Don't let him in. And if you get it here, we'll ask you to leave. It is true. Or we'll squeeze it out of you slowly by inviting you to be on a finance committee or something.
That's right. That's right. Now, can you bear with me and move back to your early years?
You ask the questions, Doctor, and we'll get it going.
Okay, good. Tell me about your childhood.
Oh,
in
dear
Pittsburgh.
God. Well, what I can tell you is that, how far back we going?
However far back you want.
Yeah, well, some of this is narrative that's been recently refreshed because my wife has discovered some details about the circumstances of my birth. What we know what we know is that I'm the product of an interracial relationship in 1963,
Mhm.
forbidden, and that my white mother was threatened to be disowned by her Irish and German family if she didn't give me up for adoption.
Where was she?
She was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and she was a 21-year-old registered nurse.
Hmm.
And my father was, as far as we can tell, he's a black man, ex-military, and working his way through a business degree. Apparently, they had a summer of love in 1963, and I am the exhibit A of that. But through a very painful sort of reckoning, she came to the place where the best thought she thought she could do for me was put me in the in an orphanage called the Rosalia Foundling Home, Rosalia, Rosalia Foundling Home.
Hmm.
And there I lived until I was adopted by Earl and Charlene Wright.
And how old were you when you were adopted?
I was 6 months old.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh no, 9 months. 9 months old.
So you have no memory of this?
I have no memory of that, and we only recently found out the details with the Freedom of Information. The new legislation got passed in Pennsylvania. All these facts, some of which I'll give you today, were really buried, in the Catholic Church's sort of commitment to confidentiality for the mothers and for circumstances.
Right.
So I was adopted by Charlene. Charlene was born and raised AME and an organist. She could play the Hammond organ and the pedals and all, and apparently did a stint as an interim organist at St. Benedict de Moore Catholic Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Ah.
And I found out, so what we understand is that somehow through a conversation with the Monsignor there, he needed a full-time organist for his Black Catholic Church, and she had always wanted a baby and apparently was physically unable. And so I'm the currency of the deal.
I see.
So Beth and I found in that parish's register my baptism and their baptism because they had to become Catholic to be eligible to adopt from a Catholic orphanage.
I see. And they willingly did that. So this was a Black Catholic parish.
It was. And so I have to thank God that I was never, in my formative years, I was never exposed to a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus.
Yeah. Now, August Wilson tells a story in his play, How I Learned What I Learned, which is autobiographical, of being a member of a Black Catholic church in Pittsburgh. Would it have been the same parish?
It would have had to have been because it was just around the corner from our house, and he lived 4 doors from me.
Okay. And the church at some point closed?
Unless there's some other iteration, but the Black Catholic Church on the corner of Center Avenue in Crawford.
Okay.
And this is all the neighborhood that he wrote about. As far as I can tell, never closed, certainly not in my years. It's open now. I mean, last time we were there, we drove by, and there he is, this gigantic, figure on top of this tall steeple, black man, jet black, with his arms outstretched. So maybe they had a fallow time or something, but as far as I know, it's remained open.
And were you active as a boy in the church?
Well, like many boys in the church, I was forced to go to church, and especially if your mother's the organist. And I was invited to acolyte, and did a very little bit of that. My sister not my sister, but myself. That was before girls could be wandering around on the altar. So I did a little bit of, candle stuffing out and,
Yeah.
those sorts of things. I do remember that,
Mhm.
but not a whole lot in my memory. I did a lot of pew sitting
Mhm.
under duress.
Now you mentioned your sister. So you were not an only child.
So 2 years after my adoption, we learned that my mother and father adopted a little girl. Her name is Naomi. And so while we are not biologically siblings, we were raised nevertheless as siblings. And, that is as far as I'm concerned, that is my sister.
Yes.
Yeah.
And is she still with us?
She is very much so. She's February 10th and I'm February 3rd, 1964.
Wow. A year apart. That's wonderful.
Yeah, both of us biracial, the kids as well. Yeah, so in some ways, both of us sort of left behind based on that fact.
And did you know when you were a boy that you had an interracial mother and father, birth mother and father?
So again, sort of complicated. No, I didn't know that I was adopted, number one, until about 8 years old.
Oh,
we were
okay.
in Washington, Pennsylvania, at a homecoming of my mother's home church
Mhm.
in a place called Cannonsburg, which is a west of Pittsburgh by some bit. And my sister and I were there, and festivities and Black folks everywhere and such. And so some lady came walking down the hall and said, "Oh, these are the two that Charlene adopted." And so that was the very first time where I think either of us gave it any thought. She adopted us when she was 50 years old. He was 51
Oh.
and she was 50. And
Mhm.
so what I like to tell people is that that was before Oprah. That was when people said that children don't need to know everything.
Yes.
And so that was sort of a conversation that was forced on my mother, and I don't think she did a really good job at that. I mean, she sort of closed it down because of her own vulnerability and feelings about the thing. But it eventually bubbled up. But it was obvious to Naomi and I. Naomi's lighter than I am. I'm fairly light skinned. Naomi's lighter than me with straight hair.
Yeah.
And so it was obvious, and we grew up, in the Hill District, which is the Black section of town.
Yes.
And so we were oftentimes among the very lightest in the room. So we knew something was up. But my adopted father was a very dark skinned man, and my adopted mother, Charlene, was, I don't know, a little bit, maybe it's a tad browner than I am. So it was, for an ignorant child, it was plausible.
Yeah. Yeah. And was that unsettling to you to discover that truth?
Well, it was unsettling in that, I mean, I'm able to articulate all this now. It was unsettling that, when you're a kid, you're aware of difference, right? You're not the same. The hair is not the same. The skin color is not the same.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when I was growing up, in the wake of the Black Power movement, Black was beautiful. The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, and all those sorts of things. And so it wasn't until Howard University, when I went to Howard University many years later, that I found out that what we would call yellow skin was a premium, because when I was growing up in the hood, brown was what you wanted to be. The browner the better. And so my sister and I stuck out, and so always felt like, not exactly perfect fits. I mean, so when we were engaged with white people, we were too brown to be white.
Yep.
And when we were engaged with, our friends and colleagues, friends and, neighborhood mates and so on, we were too light to actually blend in there. And so it was it was it was unsettling, I suppose, and you know, you feel not quite, um, you know, as a youngster.
Okay. Now, what about your knowledge or sense of spirituality during that time? How would you
Yeah,
describe that?
yeah, that's an excellent question, really, because um, I would say at a very young age, I had an abiding sense that God was real and spirit was real, and you know, the heavenly host and all that stuff was real. That all made, you know, I mean, it was sort of a tacit uh, trust in all of that.
Hmm.
I never had any, still to this day, I've never had any serious questioning of the truth of God and the reality of spirit, and
Hmm.
also the truth of evil, the reality
Hmm.
of evil. That
Hmm.
I sort of can get there pretty quickly. Um, so you know what I was and remain suspicious of is you know, how often the church um, is sort of parallel. I mean, not parallel, but perpendicular to the God we talk about in Scripture, and the God of creation and so on. And so I was aware of sort of some of that, but you know, my mother was a church organist. Maybe I should answer it that way. And so the music, and
Yes.
even before we called you, Beth and I were listening to music.
Yeah.
You know, the music has always been the wind that my spirituality has ridden on. Um, you know, and she would play, you know, one of the ways she worked through her own depression and maybe gave voice to her happiness and joy was on that organ, which was in the middle of which was in our living room. We had a
Yes.
small Hammond in our living room, and you know, she would take to it at various times and so on. And so I mean, so I got you know, and then you know, in our home we played Mahalia Jackson, you know, and you know, there was Leg of Lamb. You could smell all that in Easter, and
Yes.
you know, black hair frying, you know, and all that sort of you know, the smell of all that. You know, I mean, so I mean, I grew up with all of that, and so God was always a family member.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know, it was
What were some
always
of those songs that that you know when you close your eyes at night and you know, or when you're driving along or walking down the street, those songs, what are those songs that come back to you from your childhood?
well, you know, the Trouble of the World was Mahalia Jackson's
Yes.
thing. Let's see. I mean, a lot of the I mean, I can't really recall them right off the top of my head. I'd have to take a minute to think about that. But I mean, Precious Lord. I mean, you know,
Yes.
really just the staples. And as you know, when people play those notes through their own pain,
Yeah.
you know, they really are ministering those words
Yes.
from
Yes.
you know, Thomas Dorsey or those people. And so it was not only the notes, but it was also the pain and the you know, all of that. So um, let's see. I'll have to think about that. Precious Lord. Oh Lord, it was one was getting ready to come to me. I might have to come back to that one.
Okay.
Um, but but uh, but you know, that was one of the most important things for me down the road when I became the rector of a church, was to really tend to that and to really make space for not only our regular 82 hymnal, but Leave
Hmm.
Us and also other songs.
Hmm.
And I think that if anything drove, you know, the growth and uh, effectiveness of our work at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Atlanta, it was because we really curated that part of it well. I mean, you really, if you're gonna, if you know Black people wherever they are in the diaspora, you know, you got to get the music right for
That's
the
right.
thing to work, for it
That's
to
right.
work.
That's right.
And they will endure average preaching if there's above average singing. And
Ain't that the
so
truth?
I became really conscious of that. I think because out of my childhood, I heard, good stuff.
Yes.
And I heard how cathartic it was, especially in terms of Black pain.
Mm-hmm.
So on the day that the Sunday after Katrina, and when you pick it, some Black kid was killed or whatever, the music had to really go the extra mile to try to give voice to to those moments in a particular way. I think it didn't necessarily have to happen, in some of our white churches.
Yes.
But you really had to get into the hymnal on those Sundays. So the Sunday that, for instance, that Barack Obama won, you really had to get down into the hymnal and try to figure out how best to give voice to what we were feeling, because that unleashed everything. So I go all the way back to my living room on Bedford Avenue as my sort of where my sensitivity for all of that started.
That's wonderful. What were you a good student?
I was bright but distracted, just like I am now. I had a seminary professor tell me one time in a write up to my bishop. So Rob has flashes of brilliance, but no, Rob has flashes of brilliance, but only about the things that he is interested in.
Who would have been that professor?
What's that?
Who would have been that professor? Oh, we stalled out. Oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, so you're dropping out a little bit. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Who would have been that professor?
Okay, yeah. So that was Murray Newman, my Old Testament professor.
Yeah, I don't think I knew him.
Yeah, he was delightful and brilliant in his own right, and had one of the best sense of humors I think I've met in anybody. But I think he worked really hard to make me feel at home there and try to learn my language. He was my colloquy professor, and I skipped out one time to go to the Million Man March my first year.
Yes, that was 95.
And his way to process that, even though my absence was glaring, was when I got back was to ask me to talk about that in the group.
Yeah.
And Virginia is not known to be a bastion of inclusivity and appreciation of diverse narratives. So especially then. And so I appreciated his invitation and welcome in that regard.
Yeah.
But he was just, he made the Old Testament come alive in amazing ways. I still can quote, the song of Miriam because of him. Shiru li Yahweh ki gaoga suswa rokovo rama vayam.
Is that the Lord has triumphed mightily, horse and driver have been thrown into the sea?
Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed marvelously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea.
To the sea. Yes.
That was Murray Newman. So
and she sang and she danced.
She sang and she danced. She did indeed. And the Song of Moses ripped her off and didn't pay her any royalties.
That's exactly true. Right. That is true. We know about all that, don't we?
We do know about that. But as far as a student is concerned, I'm not falsely modest, and so I'm bright, but I've often been bored in school.
Yes.
And so that I guess that maybe best characterizes how I've been. For me, it has always been about the real connection with some professor who sort of had interesting potpourri of gifts and experiences that sort of unlocked my attention.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when you graduated from high school, did you go right to college at that time?
So I graduated from Peabody High School in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is now Obama High School there. And 7 days later, I was enlisted in the U.S. Navy.
Oh, yes.
I had never seen the ocean, neither had I been on an airplane
Uh-huh.
at 18 years old. And I went to a place called Great Lakes, Illinois, or as we came to call it, Great Mistakes. And I did boot camp there.
So this was 81?
That would have been 82, yeah.
82.
Yeah, I
And
graduated in 82.
so we were not involved in some theater, some combat at that time, I assume, right?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? But America is an empire,
Yeah.
and what I learned after being forward deployed, I went to boot camp, I went to the fleet, I went to flight school, I went to dive school, and then I was deployed. And in the work that I did, I found myself in support of a number of special forces initiatives.
I see.
So that to say, actually, America is always at war. It's just that it is not the kind of war that we commonly, it's not the kind of behavior we commonly associate with war.
Yeah.
It's in support of empire. So for instance, so it's in support of empire. And I got a chance to see that firsthand. I got home after 5 years in the Navy and watched the news and read the papers to find out that I had never been where I had been for the last 5 years.
I see.
And the people who held elected office, even the highest office in the land, that I did not take them where I had taken them personally around the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I found that fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this was toward the end of Ronald Reagan's term in office.
That's right.
And
that's right. That's
right.
exactly
And oh my
right.
goodness, and AIDS was running rampant.
So there was AIDS. There was good Lord, the bombing in Beirut.
Oh yeah.
I was on an aircraft carrier then. There were a number of things that we were doing, under the auspices of making the world free.
Are you, when you look back on your military experience, how would you describe it as being, having contributed to your life in its secular way and your spiritual life? So
I think that, I always wanted to leave Pittsburgh just as soon as I could.
Mm-hmm.
My home life was not pleasant. My father died when I was 13.
Wow.
My mother struggled with what I would now know to be depression.
Yeah.
She eventually would have a brain aneurysm.
Oh.
And both of them worked as domestics, incidentally. And so I was ready to leave. I grew up reading National Geographic, and watching on television the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau and all of that. So I knew there was a big, glorious world out there, and I knew that there was more than southwestern Pennsylvania. And so I had a friend who had gone to the Navy the year before from high school, and came back and told me there were pretty girls everywhere and that the world is interesting and all this sort of stuff. And most of the people in my neighborhood went to college on sports scholarships.
Yeah.
And so, I had dated a girl who was sort of headed straight for college, but I didn't know very many people who were going to college.
Mhm.
Only a smattering of folks in my high school class were headed in that direction. So yeah, and so I look back on my time in the Navy as completely favorable. So to eventually get to fly helicopters every day, to literally get around the world 2 times, to be in an ocean that is so black at night, and to see a full moon shine like a spotlight, um, and to see that the majority of the world are people of color.
Yes.
It had an immense effect on me, both spiritually and I think in terms of self-esteem and self-possession. Um, I leave I think also in a very practical way, it put me into relationships of interdependence with people who are very different from me.
Yes.
uh, and we got a chance to get beside each other to serve a common mission.
Hmm.
And we figured out politics and race and sexuality and all that other stuff, over bourbon and cigarettes later.
Hmm.
And so that continues to animate what I think is possible for people. I think I saw people from various backgrounds all over America who came together in helicopter detachments and teams uh, and 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 work, and people were able to achieve things together, great things together, and rely on each other. And I think in some ways the church could take a real lesson from some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the celebrated, underappreciated aspects of the U.S. military experience.
It is. It is. There were. It's not all rosy and all that, but I think that there are some amazing building blocks there.
Hmm.
While I was in the Navy, even though I was raised in the church, in my first duty station, which was on the nuclear aircraft carrier, I had a guy who was the welterweight boxing champion of the armed forces. Asked me, and he sort of, when he came in the room, he's a little guy, welterweight's only like 140 some odd pounds. And every time he would come in the room, people would sort of be quiet and put down the smutty magazines and things. I mean, this guy just had a certain amount of moral authority.
Hmm.
And I would later find out it didn't have very much to do with his boxing skill. Anyway, he asked me one time a question that no one had ever put to me. And this point, I'm 18, 19. He said, I think he said, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?
Mm.
And, like a lot of people in liturgical churches, Catholics, Episcopalians, etc., I had never had it really put to me straight like that.
Right.
And I immediately was sort of intrigued and apprehensive all at the same time. And he said, well, if you do, we can come together some point and we can pray about that. And one day in the shop, after the workday was over, that's exactly what we did. He led me in prayer, and I do you accept Jesus as Lord? I do, and I like to tell people. And as soon as I said those words, absolutely, there was no flash of lightning, there was no roll of thunder, but I didn't, as the Methodists will tell you, I didn't feel my heart strangely warm, but I felt something, and I can't quite articulate it, but something promising felt like it had just happened.
Wow. So would you call that as Jennifer Baskerville Burroughs described it, a conversion experience?
I would say it was a I guess I would have to, wouldn't I? I think, yeah. I think it was not like hers, which was an adult baptism,
Yeah.
into that, I felt like I was being introduced to someone who was this man's real friend.
Wow.
And let me just say something after that. What, you know, so I started attending. So he gave me a Bible. By the way, I still had the Bible. He gave me a little Bible. And I started, trying to make my way with the Bible and so on. And I would go, he would convene prayer services, and this guy was like I said, this was a welterweight champion of the armed forces. I mean, this was a man's man, if you will. And I remember after going to a number of prayer services, and we're forward deployed, we're out in the middle of the Indian Ocean for lots of days and all kinds of stuff. I remember the guy standing up in one of the prayer meetings and saying, there's something on my heart I need to share with you today. And I don't know, maybe it was an audience of maybe 25 or so people, maybe a little bit more. He said, I want to be
mostly men.
Only men. Back then, there was only men on warships.
Okay.
And he said, there's something on my heart I need to say to y'all so that I can truly be free. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And he said that he and his brother had come from Cuba, and illegally so, and that he and his brother were poor. I mean, all they had in the world was one another, and they were poor, and they were working menial jobs and so on. And at some point in some sort of hotel or resort configuration, they were invited to start selling their bodies for sex to older men. And they did this to make money.
Yeah.
And he was telling this. And I don't know if this was a long stretch of their life, but it was a part of their journey.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking to myself, because of course I grew up with, those terrible words about homosexuality and so on and so forth. And so, just that physical act was, the thought of that was just, just beyond the pale. And for this man, who was a man's man, and this spiritual leader, to talk about this had been part of his journey. And I thought to myself, I think I came away from that thinking to myself, what would make a man? I mean, really any human being, but what would make a man risk his reputation and risk by telling this? I mean, I had more questions than I had answers based on that experience. Who did he know? And such assurance and such confidence.
Yeah.
That he could claim all chapters of his journey. He's, at his courage.
Yeah.
And as I think back, I think people experienced it as courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then after maybe a month or two, I flew to Memphis, Tennessee, and started my training as a helicopter mechanic.
I see. And when did you decide to go to Howard?
So when I was in Memphis, I was in a little town called Millington, Tennessee, which is where they had the naval base there, where I was to learn how to be a helicopter mechanic. I had scored really high in engineering, and they said, well, we'll guarantee you what's called an A school. And so I flew off the ship and went to Millington, Tennessee to do the A school. While I was out one evening at a club in Memphis, I met a girl, and we had a drink, and we were chit-chatting and so on. And She said, "Oh, you ought to come and visit with me sometime," and so on. So I went and visited with her sometime, and she showed me her college yearbook.
Oh.
She was a engineering student at Howard University. And I did not grow up knowing anything about HBCUs. Like I knew nothing
Yeah.
about them, nothing at all.
Yeah.
And she showed me her yearbook, and I said, "Where is this magical, mystical, magical place? Where it's where the women are beautiful and they outnumber the guys by a good bit. And where is this place?" And so, fast forward, I was at a real intersection around, re-enlistment. I'd done a good job. I had been promoted, and now I was faced with the decision of whether I would re-enlist. They wanted to offer me a re-enlistment bonus, $40,000. That was a lot of money for a kid like me, to re-enlist or to leave the Navy and to go to college. And so that was where that was one of the first times I would have to say that I really prayed at an intersection, a real important intersection. And so one of the reasons why, well, I prayed for wisdom. I prayed that God would guide me. I mean, I didn't even know anybody who went to college. I didn't call. There was nobody to call. That was prior to Google. There was no, I had to just, and I was talking to people who were in my helicopter detachment, and they were not at the intersection that I was at, and so a lot of them had made their choice to re-enlist. And for them, and for a lot of Americans, $40 grand is a lot of money for a 22-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And so I prayed for guidance and all that sort of stuff. And then, I am not a risk-averse personality, and so I thought to myself, I'm going to give it a try. I will say too that part of my deciding to go to college was influenced by some of the white officers that I would encounter regularly, who we would call them now microaggressions.
Yeah.
Then I would call them people being an asshole.
Yeah.
So to be a helicopter crew chief, you have to know how to fix them, fly them, and jump out of them.
Yeah.
And to be a pilot, all you really have to do is sort of, get a college degree, and then you go to officer candidate school and flight school.
Yeah.
So, I just remember, remarks by these white officers to me, and while they knew really half of what I knew about the aircraft, and I just remember thinking to myself, they eat better than me, they sleep better than me, they make more than I do. And I remember thinking to myself, I know I got to be at least as smart as them. I'm probably smarter. So I decided that, I guess that tapped into my rebelliousness. I decided that I'm going to go to college, even though I knew no one who had.
And so you got to Howard in what year? What year was that? 1990?
So 87, the fall of 87.
Oh, okay. All right.
So
5 years later. Yeah.
5 years later. So I was in the Navy 5 years. And let me say, before we get into Howard, back then you had to request everything by mail. So I requested, I was in the Indian Ocean on deployment, and I wrote a letter and requested the SAT in the mail.
Wow.
And I took it on the mess decks at night after flying all day with somebody standing over me so I wouldn't cheat.
Wow.
I had no prep class. I had nothing. I just said, I know I'm smart. I'm sure I can do it. Now, I would never give anybody any advice to do that way nowadays.
Right.
But, you work with whatever broken tools you have at the time. So that's what I did. So I showed up in the fall of 1987.
When you were there, how did you express your need for spiritual guidance and having a prayer life?
Well, I think I didn't at first. I mean, my time at Howard was quite an evolution. So I mean, I really came there absolutely convinced of who God was, and I had it. I mean, I had no questions for God. I believed in God.
Yeah.
And strongly believed. I mean, just again, circumnavigating the world, being all over the world, you see the richness and diversity of creation. I mean, I've seen whales out in the middle of the ocean, dolphins playing in the in the ship's wake. I mean, you get us. I mean, I've seen the sky. I've seen storms with swells so big that they came over the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. I mean, I had a sense of God, but what got called into question when I went to Howard was Jesus. So I started taking history classes. I've always been interested in history.
Yeah.
So it's in those classes that I really got a sense of what white people did to Black people under the banner of Jesus.
Oof.
And that really turned me off from Jesus. I mean, at that point, I could have been a Muslim. I was going to be something, but I didn't have to be Christian. I remember I got these beautiful gold crosses from Thailand that I used to wear around my neck. And I remember giving them to a good friend of mine. She's still my friend today, a woman by the name of Kelly. I remember giving her those because I just couldn't wear the symbol anymore. Because I was really familiar what some of the slave ships being named the good ship Jesus, and the Pope's statement and the Bishop of London's statement. Baptism only changes the spiritual nature of the slave, but it actually doubles the slave's commitment, or duty to the slave master. I mean, that's what the Bishop of London wrote. To go through all that, a jot and tittle, and so I had nothing to do with church or worship services or anything, probably for about the first 2.5, maybe 3 years.
Well, of course, they found lots of ammunition among the letters of Paul.
Well, exactly right. Exactly right. Now I got Paul saying, slaves, be obedient to your masters. We got all. I mean, I got and when you're at a campus like Howard or many other campuses, I'm sure you're sitting there chopping it up with folks. You having a beer or whatever you're having, and y'all sitting up late at night chatting, having these quasi-philosophical conversations. And, just being a Christian, a good Christian, seemed untenable at that time because of the contradictions. My classmate was Ross Baraka, Amiri Baraka's son. And, we sitting up talking about, all this kind of stuff. And, really just who could outshout, who could out argue the other one, really. And so I walked away from all of that. I walked away from all of that philosophically, still believing God, still holding that very much dear, but just, I gave away Jesus as, this 2,000-year-old pawn in the white man's sort of conquest of the world. And it wasn't until I took a class called historiography, taught by a Puerto Rican woman, Dr. Maria Brau, who was married to a Polish man. And she was a fascinating character. Those are the days when teachers smoked cigarettes and put out the ashes in the chalk ledge. And you could ask your teacher for a cigarette during class.
Yes. Yes.
I remember sitting in the back of the room. You could smoke in the room, first of all.
Yeah, we smoked in exams.
Exactly. And I remember smoking a cigarette. She's teaching. Well, well, now, but here's where the big shift came. And it was at Maria Brow's hand. It was the Holy Spirit working through Maria Brow. And Maria Brow, an exercise in historiography, whose goal is objectivity. The historian must try to apply objectivity. She said to me, she said, I want you to pick a battle from somewhere in the world that you have no emotional stake in. That was our assignment.
Okay.
You have no emotional stake in. I know you could write about slave ships and all this other sort of stuff, but I want you to pick a battle that you have no emotional investment in it and try on this idea of objectivity. Well, I chose, for whatever reason, the Battle of the Ants de Foulon. You probably never heard of it.
Never.
Ansedufulon, I think. Well, that was the point. I never heard about it. So I had to dig into it as a scholar, trying to understand both sides. Well, the upshot is this. White people have raped and pillaged white people, and black people have raped and pillaged black people. There's this thing called sin. And so that was the upshot, at least spiritually for me, with that exercise, is that these white people were colonizing and dislocating other white people. And then that called up for me, so what is sin? And then, giving you a lot of shorthand here, then I realized that you can't throw Jesus out with the bathwater. You can't throw the baby and the bathwater out. So what people did in Jesus's name does not necessarily correlate to us abandoning Jesus. And that just sent me, careening towards maybe there's something about this Jesus, and maybe I need to get to know him sort of beyond, his colonial celebrity.
You've just stopped me. I need to think about this.
Okay.
What I want to say is that that permitted you to liberate your understanding of what Jesus could be in your life. Well, yeah,
what it did was, I guess the one way to frame it, Riley, would be, when you might be dating somebody and you want to quit them,
yeah,
or maybe even divorce them, but some kind of way you find a thread enough to pull back in.
Yeah.
And so, Jesus had been important to me.
Mm-hmm.
That was the name I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
That was who I had accepted on the ship. And so, we had been broken up.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to get back to him. I didn't even know if it was worth getting back to him.
Okay, it's clearer to me now. Yeah. I hear you.
And so when I found this notion of sin,
mm-hmm.
it allowed me to take a second look. My wife would say the word respect means respectacle, which is to take a look again. It allowed me to take a look again. And when I started taking a look again,
like that,
then that opened up this next major movement in my life, which starts now to include the Episcopal Church.
Mm-hmm. How so?
So while all of this is happening for me, I'm dating a girl, and I later found out, that girl was the daughter of Chet Talton, who was the suffragan bishop of LA.
Yeah.
So when we started sort of dating, it was really sort of just, hanging out, and drugs and parties and having a good time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then increasingly, I started talking about spirituality, about, maybe figuring out if there was a church, maybe wanting to church shop a little bit, maybe wanting to sort of scratch this itch. Now, what's funny about that to me is that she, as a PK and a BK, was doing everything she could do to go in the opposite direction.
course.
right? She had had enough of that her whole life.
Yeah.
And so, I always joke and say, she was the most unlikely and reluctant evangelist that the world has ever known. And so I do have to thank her as I look back, and she went to a number of churches with me. But having grown up in the church, and I would hope my own children would be able to do this. I remember one time we were walking back from a church service in the morning, and she had also done braiding of hair for girls, right?
Yeah.
And so it had lots of friends. It was very popular at braiding. She was very good, and had a lot of gay friends too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we go to this Baptist church, and we're sitting up there, and she's only there because I said, why don't you come with me? And this time it's 87, 88, 89, whatever it is, probably 89. And the pastor's just haranguing on the immorality of homosexuality and all that sort of stuff. And the church is packed, and a lot of Howard kids are there, etc.
Yeah.
And so we're walking back, I don't know, for brunch or whatever it was. And she just starts going on about the fact that she knows a good portion of the people sitting up in that church, the kids, and many of them have been her clients or friends or been with her on gay night at this nightclub called Tracks. They played the best music. So whether you're gay or straight,
I know Tracks.
That was the place to be, man. They played the best music. And then she just goes on this little tirade, which ended up being really instructive for me about what religion should be and what church should be, about welcoming and affirming and all these sorts of stuff. And then she just sort of, I can't remember the specifics, but the conversation basically was, well, then who is God then? And these people, and what is the church?
Yeah.
Which is a conversation she's probably been wrestling with her whole life.
Right.
And so I think that was the last church visit we ever had. But the great blessing that I have to say that she gave me was she introduced me to a guy who had been formerly the chaplain at Howard University, and now was the brand new rector of St. George's Episcopal Church, just in the shadow of Howard. So like literally, I think she said, hey, I know a guy that you might want to talk to.
Yes.
And that was sort of the handoff. I mean, our relationship ended after that. But she had sort of handed me over to him. And so in meeting Vincent Harris and finding St. George's, I felt nearly immediately at home.
Must have been a remarkable place.
It was. I had never really encountered. It was the place and the guy. I mean, if I think that God sometimes shows God's wisdom and deep genius when God pairs up a messenger with someone who needs a message. And so here's a HBCU grad, a guy who has been a college chaplain, who likes bourbon and who smokes cigarettes. And what I like to say is, someone who's not so holy, he's going to fly away. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And human. And so exactly. And so he was exactly the right delivery system for somebody like me who came with not a little bit of skepticism and a whole lot of questions. And so because St. George's was a liturgical church, Episcopal Church was a liturgic church, that felt like, my Catholic upbringing. But then there was this accessible guy up there that I could talk to, that made time to have conversations with me, who asked better questions than I had been asked about my life, myself, my relationship with God, etc. And he also had one of those great gifts that we also don't have nearly enough of us, is when to shut the hell up.
Yeah.
and just let you get involved. And so there were just amazing people at St. George's, quite apart from Vincent Harris. And they welcomed me in, loved on me. And then, we started a ministry there called the Kwanzaa Kitchen, which is still there.
The what? I'm
And
sorry.
Kwanzaa Kitchen
Okay.
that still feeds neighborhood residents, and particularly residents who live in facilities close by the church, for people who have who are sort of mentally deficient,
Mm-hmm.
if we want to use that word.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got really involved with folks. And, now looking back, Vincent Harris has sent, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 of us into ordained ministry. It was an amazingly generative time at St. George's, and the Reverend Reginald Blackston was there as well.
Yes, I know Reggie.
And Reggie and Carlton Hayden.
Wow.
So in Carlton Hayden, I saw the first time I ever saw anybody preach extemporaneously.
Yeah.
And Vincent Harris, she had somebody with good humor and normalcy. And with Reggie, you just had, just fabulosity in every category.
Yeah.
From the vestments to, he would finish sermons by playing a song on the organ. So when you look at the love and support a little stray dog like me got walking in through those doors, when you got the intellectual heft that was available to me, when you got the spiritual wisdom available to me, not only in the clergy, but in the laity, I was just at home, man.
When you were there, and Rose Duncan was there too, wasn't she?
Rose Duncan, that was Rose Duncan's family church.
That's right. So
Rose Duncan, Rose, Alan Robinson would come out of there now. Allison St. Louis was in my confirmation class. We were in confirmation class together. Wow. Yeah, man. It was a very generative period at St. George's.
It was a garden that bloomed.
And Vincent, I look at Vincent, I look at some of these lay people whose names I can still call, Joseph Smith, and oh my gosh, Leslie Reed, some of these who had distinguished themselves, Dr. Shuford, these people had distinguished themselves in DC. And this is Eleanor Holmes Norton. That's her church.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And just an amazing place and an amazing time to be there. So I felt really fortunate.
Now, during this time, did you? And I'm not going to keep you too long. I promise.
Yeah. But that's okay. Yeah, I was just checking on her. Checking to see if we need a bathroom break or whatever. But let's go just a bit more.
Okay. Thank you, Beth. So let me just. Did you have a glimpse into what you would ultimately become?
I still don't. No, So let me respond to that in this fashion. So while I am sort of becoming a parishioner at St. George's, and getting to know Vincent and all that sort of stuff, I'm also working for the Children's Defense Fund as a child advocate, and I'm working for 2 mayors in Washington, D.C. for Sharon Pratt Kelly at that time. And then later Marion Barry when he comes out of jail. I'm running programs, and then ultimately for the Department of Education as a consultant in Southeast Washington, D.C., starting schools, safe school programs, etc.
So you must have known Robert Mallett.
Robert
Mallett, who was the city administrator under Sharon Pratt Kelly.
I'm not sure I remember that name. I'm sure it sounds familiar, but I can't give
okay,
anything
all right,
about it. Yeah.
All right.
But I was mostly in the field. I was very much sort of not a capital kind of guy. I had long dreadlocks. I'm in the hood with the kids, and And so while I'm at St. George's on Sunday regularly now, just enjoy, I mean, having a real honeymoon. Vincent Harris comes up to me and says, this is after we started this ministry, the Kwanzaa Kitchen, and I'm at Bible study during Lent and all this stuff. I mean, I've been there about 2 years at that point as a layperson. Vincent Harris just asked me one Sunday in the welcome line, hey man, have you ever thought about being a priest? And I thought that was the funniest shit I had ever heard in my life. I was like, I just literally laughed in his face because, I'm thinking, man, when I was a service person, I was a sailor, I was good at that. I could still cuss better than the average good cusser. I had images like a lot of people have, bullshit images about, what a clergy person is.
Yes.
Holier than thou, holy Joe, all that bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
So I just laughed in his face, man. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, they're having this thing like an orientation day over at Virginia Seminary.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you just go over there and see if any of it strikes a chord, and if not, we never have to talk about it again. And if so, then we can follow up.
Yeah.
And just on the strength of our relationship, and out of my deep respect for him, I said, okay, man, I'll do it. And so, I had to go back and eat a lot of crow because I had to come back and say, I'm intrigued.
Oh.
But I was intrigued not so much with the whole being a priest. Nowadays, commission on ministry, people tell you, oh, it's the liturgy, or I want to stand at the table and all this bullshit. For me, it was this thought of more learning, right? This thought of deeper study, and so that was really important for me. And so I didn't race ahead to think about myself standing there with a piece of plastic around my neck.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about the learning journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so my joke is with Vincent Harris is that he's been getting the last laugh all along, because he laughed when I graduated seminary, and he laughed when I was ordained a deacon, and he laughed again when I was a priest, and he laughed again when I was a bishop, and presented me for all of it.
Did you did seminary meet your expectations in terms of your learning?
I would say yes and no.
Thank you so much.
I would say I was so grateful to meet specific professors. So who loomed large for me was the largest light for me at Virginia Seminary was Walter Eversley.
Mm-hmm.
Systematic theology,
Mm-hmm.
and then to a lesser degree, Murray Newman, and then to a lesser degree, Alan Parent. It was good to sit with these, and I would say also, what's the sister, the New Testament professor who retired?
Kathy Grebe.
And Kathy Grebe. I have to put Kathy Grebe, really maybe tied with Murray Newman as number 2 for me.
Mm.
The way that she was able to open up the New Testament.
Yeah.
But I would say, so when it came to sitting in the classroom with these great teachers,
Yeah.
I felt really fortunate.
Yeah.
But as a general matter, seminary was a disappointment to me. You know, Virginia Seminary, my experience
Yeah.
was very much felt like a plantation,
Yes.
and I very much felt like a guest, and a second tier guest at that.
Yes.
Uh, and so and so what has really blessed my ministry going forward was what I learned with the Children's Defense Fund, the Ella Baker Child Policy Institute, and the Freedom School work that I did, in terms of being able to mobilize people, get to know people, and create with people, collaborate with people. So I came to Virginia Seminary after not being there very long, understanding that, I really had to edit a lot of the formation that was coming at my way. Point in fact.
What if you had not?
Well, if I had not, I would have believed stupid shit like Black people were never the leading contributors to the Christian faith.
Oh, no, that's not what I mean. But what if you had chosen to be honest and true to what you were seeing and feeling and thinking?
Oh, well, when I say edit, I don't mean editing myself in real time with people.
Okay.
I don't do a good job with that. Just ask my wife. I meant I had to look at what they were offering and only choose to take one or two things from the menu.
Got it.
No, and to this other idea. So one of the examples of me refusing to edit myself. So I had graduated from Howard University with a degree in history. I had studied at the feet of Frank M. Snowden, and so Boston, Latin, Harvard.
Yep.
Egyptologist, archaeologist. I mean, and I'm sitting in Bob Pritchett's class, and he's telling me this bullshit, and doesn't take into consideration Augustine's blackness, Origen's blackness, Athanasius' blackness, the fact that Athanasius is the one we get the canon for the New Testament from, and I raised my hand, and I'm not having any of it, and the whole classroom goes silent, and it's that moment from the Malcolm X movie where it's like, are we going to sit here and act like that actually it's Black and brown people across the diaspora who are responsible for this faith that we are laying claim to? This did not originate in Europe, and so I've been out about that kind of stuff for a very, very long time, much to the dismay of more than a few people. But I could not betray my formation at Howard University because I had ended up in Alexandria.
Well, let me just say this: Bob Pritchett did not learn the lesson, because many years later, and I sat in his class, and I had to explain to him when he told me that there was no such thing as we were reading Uncle Tom's Cabin because it was the only legitimate, accurate description of slavery. There was no such thing as a slave narrative. And I said, I will go home and bring you the slave narratives that I have.
This kind of, I mean, we don't want to get off track here, but that kind of stuff makes my blood boil, man.
Right. All right. So you're there. Where did you do your seminary and your field work?
So interestingly enough, I actually read Matthew 25, and it said that we should be affiliated with prisons. So I had to lobby field education to do it in DC jail, and I had to build it myself. Okay. And they gave me all kinds of resistance about it, but I ended up having to get a Catholic to be my supervisor.
Okay.
And I did my field education, my first piece of that, at DC jail. And I was the only person in my class to do anything like that, because I just, you're making me think a lot of thoughts here. I hadn't really told this whole story like all of this, but I've been causing shit from the beginning. And I just couldn't. The guy's name was Jack something or other, and
I remember him.
He just a little short guy with a beard, nice guy. He just could not understand and fathom. I said, man, what about what Jesus actually said, man? And anyway, so I did it, and they allowed me to do it begrudgingly. And then after that, Walter Eversley put my name in. I had done well in school there, and Walter had put my name in to go to England for a semester in my middle year. And he basically just informed me that, hey man, you really need to go to England. You really need to go. I'm going to be there on sabbatical. You need to go over there, and there's good learning for you to do. Now, he was staying in Oxford.
Yeah.
But the woman who was the other person whose name was put forward, she really wanted to go to Oxford. And I didn't really care. I mean, right. Cambridge is not a very far coach ride from Oxford. So I said, well, her name is Stacy Fusell. She's a priest in the church in Texas. And I said, well, why don't you go to Oxford since you really want to go there, and I'll just go to Cambridge. And so I ended up in Cambridge, actually, funny enough, and that's where I met Beth. So, I mean, if I would have went to Oxford, I might have met somebody else or nobody. But I met a Jamaican PK.
Oh,
how about that? So
also Anglican.
Oh yeah, her father's now deceased. Her father was a CEO of a multinational, and then became a priest.
Whoa.
How about that?
Oh, so
let me tell you this real quick. So just so you know who you're talking to, let me tell you how Anglican we are. Okay. Let me tell you our bona fides. So I didn't have very much money at all. I was over there on a wing and a prayer. Right. And so one of the first dates, I better get this right, or she's gonna tell me about it here in a minute. One of the first dates we had, not the first date, but one of the first dates we went to was sung evening song at King's College.
Oh, yeah.
Now that's how Anglican I am.
That's Anglican.
That's Anglican, baby. And we both sat there and just watched it was the boys, the boys.
Oh, choir, yeah. And they process in. Yeah.
Oh, you remember that? Mm-hmm. And let me tell you something, baby. So that's not bad for a little orphan boy from the foundling home. That ain't bad.
I hear you.
That ain't bad.
I hear you.
That ain't bad to come from public housing to Cambridge.
How'd you wind up in Atlanta?
So again, I'm gonna blame Beth here. So we're in New York City. I'm the canon pastor of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine.
Oh.
And
wait, before you go on, what years?
So I graduated in 98. Beth and I graduated from Virginia Seminary in 98.
Okay.
So I graduated in May. I'm ordained deacon at the Washington National Cathedral. Are you hearing this? Are you hearing how fancy I am?
Yeah. I got you.
Then I get married in Jamaica. I don't know how many priests, 12 priests and a bishop preside at the wedding. I'm trying to tell you something, buddy. And then I leave there and start my job at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. I guess it would have been, our wedding would have been July 4th. I guess it would have been maybe August 1. I start August 1, 98 as the school chaplain, cathedral school chaplain.
Was Paul Moore the bishop at the time?
No, he had just left.
Okay.
Dick Bryan was there.
Okay.
How did you get to look there?
So that's to say, how did I get to look there? Well, So Ron Haynes, who was my bishop in Washington,
Right.
said to me that he didn't have any positions for me. Now, by the way, I got shoulder length, longer than shoulder length dreadlocks at this point.
Okay.
And what do you want? What?
Oh, and your fiance is already in
And
New York.
Beth has already started a PhD program. Now she's my fiance at this point.
Now, where were you doing your PhD, Beth?
I was at the NYU and doing a PhD in performance studies.
Oh, at the Tisch School.
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
the graduate program.
yes, sir.
Oh my
So
goodness.
she did her master's at Clare in Cambridge.
Yes, I was doing a master's in social anthropology at Cambridge University.
Wow.
And then already had this PhD program lined up in New York at NYU. And so that's where, when he finished his final year at VTS, I was already in New York.
Well, you know, for many years, one of my best friends, she's gone now, was Zelda Fitchandler. You know, who was head of the graduate acting program at Tisch.
Oh, I did not do a lot of any really crossover with the acting program.
With the acting program, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, but you know, she founded Arena Stage.
Yes. Oh, wonderful.
So our daughter, funny enough, our daughter is in the acting program at Tisch now.
Really?
Yeah.
She's good.
Yeah.
Does she know Kenny Leon?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, she hasn't worked with Ken and Leon, but for sure she'll be exposed to him.
I mean, just being from Atlanta, you know.
Yes.
Well, you know, we have to fix that.
But let's fix it. I think, you know, she's a junior now there.
Oh,
she's a junior.
That's a very fine acting program.
She just auditioned in. She went there with 2 monologues, and they invited her in.
Well, let me tell you, when Zelda and I would go to the theater in New York, and I would always go up to go with her, she would point out all of her students, whether it was on Broadway, whether it was at the opera, you know, whether it was downtown, you know, and she would always be there for them. It was great. Anyway, all right, go ahead.
No, I was going to say.
You were at the cathedral.
Yes, I was at the cathedral, and I was the canon pastor. I had just done all the 9/11 memorials.
Ooh.
The dean had left, and I was basically
Oh, you're stalled.
I was doing all the stuff with you there?
Yeah, you were stalled for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was doing all the stuff with Senator Schumer, and then Senator Clinton, and Bernard Kerik, and Rudy Giuliani.
Yeah.
All of that to put together those memorials.
Wow.
And then that December, 2 things happened in addition to 9/11. Number one, we had a fire, a terrible, at the cathedral, which people know about. And then we had probably the most tremendous snowstorm, shut Manhattan completely down. And so we had little babies at that point. And both Beth and I said, but really Beth said, I think God is calling you down south. Well, I don't remember the exact sequence of things, but I had a conversation with somebody, and they were telling me about this opportunity, in Atlanta. And so I scurried and found out, some of the information and put my name in, and they called a young 38-year-old who had never been a rector before to be the 10th rector. I've always been the 10th. I'm the 10th bishop. Now it was the 10th rector, to be the 10th rector of historic St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Atlanta, Georgia.
You were larger than life there. I'm saying that to you. I don't know whether you want to say, but you were. You had a reputation all over the country.
Yeah. And let me say this to you, and then I think we're going to have to adjourn here. We can pick it up if we need to later, but we got to take care of the inner man and inner woman here.
Yeah, I got it.
So let me say this to you because you might find this instructive. Okay.
Bye, Beth. Thank you.
This may be somewhat controversial to you, maybe even, but it was because of Howard University that I went to St. Paul's with the tailwind that I went to St. Paul's. So when I got there, like a lot of Episcopal parishes, they're just content to sort of be ghettoized in some part of town and blah, blah, blah around the edges. That was just too small for me. And the excellence that we achieved together was really out of the fact that so many of them had graduated from Morehouse and so many of them had graduated from Spelman. And I was the outlier from Howard, although there were a couple of Howard people there. And I just said, in really material ways, in terms of excellence in music, in terms of excellence in financing and all that sort of stuff, I was like, we've got to do better. When I got there, we weren't taking any subsidies from the diocese, but we were not paying our full freight. We were not saying to the entire diocese, we are not a Black congregation. I said to them, we are the best congregation in this diocese. And that resonated. And it was not without difficult days when I changed the music program.
Yeah.
We fired a guy, a lovely guy, who was the dean at Morehouse, Calvin Grimes, Dr. Calvin Grimes, a wonderful, wonderful man, but had lost his fire, and we changed the music program around. And I'll spare you the journey there, and maybe you want to dig into that another time. But 3 years later, we end up with 100-voice volunteer choir. Can you imagine preaching every Sunday with 100-voice volunteer choir? I'm telling you, what is it? The pillars of the temple shook. We had people joining our church, leaving Baptist churches, coming to St. Paul's. I would stand on the floor and preach conversationally with people, and then they would take over. And boy, I want to tell you something. And then it got so big that we started filling up Sisters Chapel and then Morehouse Chapel with our Christmas program.
Oh,
that started to rival. I mean, not really, but started going in that direction. What Morehouse and Spelman were doing. And this volunteer choir, not one person, not one paid singer, not one. I refused, not one. And so when I look back at that, what I really have to say is that these lay people were tremendous. And I was talking to Martini Shaw at St. Thomas, and I was talking to Alan, and and this is the part of me that is just, we used to term in New York striver. The striver in me said, why shouldn't St. Paul's be mentioned in the same breath as, St. Thomas or St. James? In fact, we should be. And in material ways, we actually passed them both up. When I started, we were $190,000 all in. When I left, we were $1.2 million all in.
there you go.
When I started, we were 150 people all in. When I left, our Sunday school was 150 people.
I hear you.
It was Bishop is a whole nother conversation, but that was you talk about pulling in a net too heavy with fish that you can't do it by yourself. I mean, it was so wonderful. And I really lost taste for UBE and all that sort of stuff. And I just decided to myself that the best thing I can do for the Black Episcopal Church is to grow one. I wrote a very controversial letter, which you may have seen, called Why Many Black Congregations Should Close.
Okay.
No, I said die.
Yeah.
And that needs to be in the letter somewhere. And I made no friends for telling that truth. And the truth of that is that, a lot of us are just living on the largesse of white bishops who are only supporting us out of guilt and shame.
I've got to have a copy of that letter. Can I
I
call
got-
your assistant and get a copy, please?
Well, I gotta find it first. I don't know where the hell it is, Riley. I
All
mean,
right.
that was when Angela was still the head of the Black Desk.
All right,
Yeah.
so, but what I could do though is, I wonder if I could, no, particularly what's happening in Washington right now,
Yeah, I know.
and that is
yeah.
so important. Not only is it important for what's happening here right now, but it's also important in terms of the history of the church.
I'll try to find it. I I'll sign off now, but we
All right,
gotta-
all right. Can we,
because we never got to Bishop.
no, not even close. All right, so let's do this soon, please.
Okay.
Please.
Well, no, I'll tell you what. We're heading to Amelia Island now,
Okay,
and just have a little battery recharge ourselves,
good.
and then I'll be back next week. And so, why don't I get a hold of you on Monday,
Okay,
and let's see if we can, block out a little time.
okay, thank you. Hey, thank you.
You're welcome, man. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
All right. Yeah,
Right.
no worries, Riley.
Blessings, safe travels.
All right, bro. Take
All
care,
right.
man.
Take care.
Bye bye. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm recording it, right. Did you enjoy your morning at Ebenezer?
I did. I've known Raphael now 16 years.
Yeah,
Ever since he came to Atlanta. I came to Atlanta just a couple years before he did, about 4 years before he did. And so, but this is the first time I've been invited to preach, and I was invited to preach on the church anniversary, as well as the first day they were back in the sanctuary.
wow.
So to be a preacher, it
Yeah.
was fun. I could have got up there and said my ABCs, and
Yeah.
I would have had a good time. But they were fun, and they know how to help a preacher out. They know how to talk to a preacher, But all I wanted to get said to them was, I know you Ebenezer, I know you big and bad, but there's still work to do even for y'all.
Yes.
So that's what we try to say. But it was a blast, man. I loved it. My wife loved it. It was fun.
Yeah. And I love our old congregations, the ones that are still vibrant.
Yes.
I think I may have mentioned to you when I drive up and down 11th Street here in the District of Columbia, I am sorely grieved at the empty houses of worship. However, and I want to get to this at some point today before it gets to be too late, your letter that I haven't been able to get my hands on, but
You
your
have it?
letter. No, I tried. Your letter that suggests that there are congregations that need to close, and I know you think that it's controversial. Of course, it is controversial, but I don't think I disagree with you at all.
Well, that letter got me in so much shit. If I'm going to look for it. That's the problem with changing computers over the years and so on, that you lose shit. But that I wrote that at Camp Allen when I was there for something. Man, when that went out, Kurt Wright Douglas, I mean, people called me everything but a child of God. And but I wasn't wrong though.
I don't think so. I don't think so either.
That was the problem. I wasn't wrong, actually. And I understand that it was not easy to hear. I'm trying to see if I can find it.
But it kind of reminds me of these standards about that we hold on to, these ideas that we hold on to that are no longer working for us.
I found it.
Oh, excellent.
Now, I don't know if this is the draft or whatever, so, you know, I'll just say to you, you know, take a look at this with a kinder eye.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But good Lord, it even has my because I put my email address and my phone number on it. I was like, you can call me if you want to.
You were asking for it.
I was. That was so stupid. Let's see here. I'm gonna try to put it right here.
Okay.
I would have never thought I would have found it. My gosh.
I said something the other day. I have every Saturday morning. I meet with via Zoom with a group of guys who, and we were all in college at the same time.
Yes.
And lived in this remarkable house that was full of very fine academics and scholars. We didn't know what we had at the time. Of course, that's typical of all of us. And, you know, for 2 solid semesters, our average GPA was 3.8, average.
Okay.
You know, these guys have gone on to become great lawyers, doctors, CEOs. I mean, CEO of Pepsi and blah, 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 blah. And I said something the other day. We were talking about, most of them are white. We were talking the other day about school integration, and the frustration. And I said, I think it's time to stop being frustrated by it. And I think it's time for Black people to reclaim our Black schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And stop turning our children over to the care and feeding of people who don't care about them.
Yes, that is true. Because they certainly don't.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
Well, I sent it to you. You are the first person to ask for this and to have it, and I might need to read through that again, and I might clean it up. But you will see that I basically was saying that you know, we have not fed and watered these things. We have held on too much to our oppressors' ways rather than feeding our people. Because when we started incorporating all kinds of music, not just the 82 hymnal, man, my biggest problem was parking. And what I did in the Atlanta religious marketplace was there was people who were doing contemporary stuff, but no traditional stuff.
Yeah.
And there were people who were doing and vice versa. But we did 5 genres. And if you do them well, it was amazing at the amount of people that you can attract.
Now, when you mean 5 genres, which are the 5?
Well, they're sort of genres. We did the first Sunday was 82 hymnal, Smells and Bells, right down the middle, right? Second Sunday, no vestments at all, no procession, no recession, starting in place in some ways like Ebenezer, with soloists. And with we called that, it was second Sunday, we called that, oh, good Lord, my gosh. We called that, well, that was our contemporary. That was our most contemporary expression. People would walk in and, you know, get sort of acclimated with the music, and then the liturgy would just begin with music and praise. And then we would really, in some ways, it was a bit of a bait and switch because it was really sort of 82 with a flourish, you know, the 82 hymnal with a flourish. I mean, the 79 prayer book with a flourish.
Yeah.
Third Sunday was men's voices like Morehouse, blue blazers, red ties.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, and that began to grow with younger men. And maybe some of that was specific to Atlanta because a lot of these guys had been Morehouse men. A lot of these guys had been at the AUC, you know, et cetera. Fourth Sunday was women, sopranos, voices, you know, beautiful. And that choir grew sort of a la Spelman choir.
Yeah.
And then the fifth Sunday was children, and they planned the liturgy and did everything but consecrate the bread.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
wow.
And it was, you know, that was an experiment we ran, and it was not easy, but boy, when it got going, it was a hot ticket. Our Christmas concert that incorporated all of those genres, all of those expressions, I should say, um, used to sell out Sisters Chapel at Spelman.
Yeah.
I mean, we couldn't accommodate it at the sanctuary.
You know, when we left off the last time, you were just about to talk about that your initial experience at St. Paul's and how it grew, 190,000 to 1.2 million.
Yeah.
You mentioned, using Sisters Chapel at Spelman for, the Christmas concert. When you reflect upon those days, how do you feel? What's your assessment of how it happened? Why it happened? What happened to you?
Yeah. Well, the genesis of it really was, a rector's got to be alert when they walk into place and try to find where the energy is.
Mm-hmm.
So very soon after I had joined as the rector, they had already scheduled Horace Boyer, blessed memory, one of the producers of Leave Us, as you well know.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really just a spectator at that point. I mean, I said words of welcome and opening prayers, but this was their show, and I had just sort of tagged along. They had already invited him prior to me being the rector.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched him on this not particularly beautiful upright piano that got rolled to the center of the sanctuary, beat on this thing and sing all kinds of music, not just the 82 hymnal, but beyond, the old hymns, as we would say.
Yes.
And I watched my people. Swing and sway and swoon. And I said, aha, now that's an interesting piece of data. It was lively. And I thought that I could be a lively preacher next to a musical expression like that. And I thought that would be the formula for rebirth. My bottom line is, and I know this to be true, and it still is true, is that if somebody in the church says something, and if somebody in the church sings something, then people will show up. That's just the truth. And we don't want to look at that, because we'll have to interrogate if we're actually saying something and how well we're actually singing something. And we don't want to interrogate that.
Right.
But when we do, and when we raise that bar, I'm telling you, at least for particularly people of color, and I think this is true universally, people are going to show up, because, as they say, no one ever left church humming a sermon, right? So the preacher must dance with the musical expression. It must be a dynamic partnership, and that is the delivery system, at least in these Americas. That is the delivery system for us. I would be so bold to say. And I was raised by a church organist. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to these things.
Yeah.
And if somebody will stand on the floor and talk to people about God and God's goodness,
Yes.
and then somebody will follow up by beating on an organ or a piano and singing something from their gut, from their soul, people going to show up. And so that was the formula. I watched Horace Boyer. I watched my people react to Horace Boyer. Not long after that, the gentleman who was leading the men's choir decided to take another position. Wesley Boyd was his name. And I thought to myself, here's an opportunity to seize on bringing the change, because I didn't affect that change. Wesley was going in a different direction. And so what I did, the bold step I did do, was that I asked the then organist to step down. Now, this man had been the organist for 22 years, and he was well loved. Dr. Calvin Grimes, many people called him Uncle Calvin. I mean, he's a sweet man. He's now dead. And that was probably the most controversial thing I did, was to ask him to step down. And that was met with some real rancor and upset. And I understood that. but I'll fast forward through all of that. And we worked through that, and we took them back to to their parish profile. They said they wanted their kids in church. They said they wanted it to be a multi-generational expression on Sunday. I told them that I knew how to do that, but this was part of the cost. And so we were able to make a way, but I hired a guy. Now this is an African-American congregation. I hired a guy who, I like to joke, was openly white and openly gay. So Trey Clegg came to us, and on his interview, it was just he and I in the church. We went to the organ. I put the 82 hymnal in front of him. I said, play that. He did wonderfully well. I put the Levis hymnal in front of him. I said, now play a few of these. He did those wonderfully well. And I gave him some contemporary stuff. And I said, now play this. And he played it wonderfully well. And I knew at that moment we had the goods. And so it took folks a little while to really get there, because they were really working through their loyalty to our previous configuration and their loyalty to the idea of what an Episcopal church was supposed to be like.
Mm-hmm.
But they couldn't help their feet from tapping.
Yeah.
One of my most staunch critics, who sat in the front row, a former clergy person, retired clergy person, sitting in the front row. I mean, literally, he was sitting in the front row with his arms crossed, but I could see underneath, but his feet were tapping.
Oh.
His upper part of his body said no, but his foot said hell yeah. And so after a season of that, music offered and done well, then the choir began to grow. And so when I finished, so that was 18 months in, when we got all that musical stuff resorted. When I finished, there was 100 voice volunteer choir.
Jesus.
So I don't know about you, but boy, let me tell you something. If you get to preach behind 100 voice choir that is singing something from their spirit, man, you know, all you got to do is figure out how to ride that wave, accentuate it, amplify.
Lord, plant my feet on higher ground.
That's all. And there were many a day, I'll confess, there were many a day, man, that I had to get my emotions in control as I went to the pulpit, because these people that had stirred up the place. They had stirred up the place. My children remember fondly St. Paul's and the worship experience that we had there at St. Paul's. It really was extraordinary. It really was and so many pieces came together. And then as it grew in notoriety, Andrew Young, Ambassador Andrew Young would show up, and all these kinds of people, the mayor would show up, and it became a Suzanne Malveaux would show up from CNN. It became a place to be, because I like to think that we held together excellence distributed over different kinds of music, as well as I would hope, as well as preaching that had both spiritual and intellectual heft.
Yes.
And so last thing I'll say about that is that, I'm a city boy. I don't know much about fishing, but I know you got to fish where the fish are. I think that's the first rule of fishing, is you got to find out where the fish are. And what I realized in Atlanta, and this is true for many cities, there is a large number of Black people here, Black and brown people in this city who work in an all-white context all week, whose children go to school in an all-white context all week. And not that there's anything bad about any of that, but I know as an African-American professional, and I know my wife is a Jamaican, but we'll call her African-American professional. You want some place with some regularity where you don't have to explain everything.
Yeah.
Where the way that you embody worship, and the way you embody liturgy, and the way you embody welcome,
Yeah.
is understood and spoke with fluency.
Yeah.
And so what we realized after putting some of these pieces together was that we were providing a refuge for, world weary folks,
Yeah.
and not the least of which was me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it became, we began to think of ourselves as not some little parish in the black side of town,
I see.
but as a place that was offering something to a city.
And what was happening to you? You said you saw it as a refuge as well.
Oh yeah. Oh well, I mean, well, first of all, for me personally, and I think this is how I come to all this music change stuff, is that, it's music that sustains me. I mean, I think about the roughest times in my life. It's been singing, even when I couldn't sing, somebody sang over me or sang around me, or thank God for iTunes, or whatever it is. And it stirs the soul, it strengthens you, it elevates you, all those sorts of things. And so to create a church with other people, lots of other people, um, where we were fluent in that language, brought a lot of people in who were just weary. And again, as I said, I mean, I know something about that from leadership, and I know something about that from being a husband and for being a parent and all those other things. You needed something, you needed a place. I think about all the things that happened in that congregational context that were tacit, that were unspoken. You're in a room with people. I mean, there's JDs, MDs, DDs, PhDs all over the place. There are people in that room who were classmates of Dr. King, and beyond, who have caught hell in this America, and yet still aspired for excellence. And so you draw strength from them just by being in fellowship with them. Some of the people who started the first Black bank here in Atlanta were parishioners. The mother and family of the Hamilton Holmes, who integrated UGA.
Yeah.
Charlene.
With Charlene Hunter Gall. Yeah.
Yeah, she was in the congregation. Isabella Holmes, a beautiful royal woman.
With Vernon Jordan behind her.
Exactly. And so these people were not people to know about in February. These were parishioners. And so any priest that's honest will tell you that it is the royal lay people of your congregation that leave an important impression on you. And you start to learn something about the pastoral task, as these people share out their lives with you, their ups, downs, struggles. I remember the first time I ever got any kind of significant gift to my discretionary fund as a rector, which was pretty much anemic previous, was from Isabella Holmes, Hamilton Holmes's mother.
Yeah.
And she had sold some family property over in Alabama, and she wanted to make sure her priest had everything he needed to do the things that he needed to do. And I was just so moved by her fidelity, to generosity and to this notion of sharing. I mean, it moves you, it grows you, is what I want to say. It grows you.
We still have it.
Still have what?
We still have those, what did you call them? The royalty.
We do. We have less of them. We have less of them, who had a gravitas. We have less of them.
Yeah.
They've gone on to glory, and we are not the same as them. That was that group who suffered so that you and I could have the conveniences that we have.
Correct.
And prosperity, financial prosperity came to some of them. And their financial prosperity was marked by those other years. There was another gentleman who joined the congregation. He left one congregation to come to St. Paul's. And he was one of those Maynard Jackson millionaires. When Maynard Jackson became the first African-American
Yep.
mayor of Atlanta,
Yep.
Maynard Jackson insisted that the contracts be distributed equally, even over Black contractors. And some Black contractors who were standing ready to help to build the airport, previously shut out because of their race, were now invited in to a new level of achievement, accomplishment, and prosperity. And we had
they took them to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had some of them in the congregation, and to see the lavish lifestyles that they were able to achieve through hard work, but to always see that tempered by the fact that they had come from really, modest means, and that they had come through struggle. And,
Yes.
it wasn't American history at a distance to them. These were people that they knew. And we had one guy who was a Tuskegee Airman in the congregation. I mean, and so that was, I could get lost in all that, but I guess what I want to try to say to you is that my pastoral learning journey was shaped by those folks. And as I went on, I realized how much that I wanted to be, you want to make them proud because they have made you proud, that there was a transaction there. And so we just tried to live that out in every aspect of what we were doing. And that's why the bar had to be at a certain level. Because we were so-and-so's pastor or so-and-so's church and so-and-so. And not in some sort of sedity, that's sedity sort of precious way, but because folks were deserving of the best, because they had given America and the church the best. Yeah, really, that really left a mark on me. Even as I became bishop, I was proud to make them proud. That their rector had become the first African-American bishop of Atlanta.
You sound as if you were lifted by it. I can feel that as you talk about it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And maybe I'm particularly weird, which is probably true too, in that my first degree is in history. And so I went to Howard University and I studied history. And so it has always been a natural sort of thing for me to look back and appreciate and to see these stories. And when these stories are sitting next to you or sitting across a table from you, I bring a particular respect to that. To be able to call Andy Young or some of these other folks, Felker Ward, Isabel Holmes, Gladys Richardson, to call these people who made history, and they pick up the phone and want to chat with you and want to pour into you. So I guess if I wanted to zoom out, I guess what I would want to say is that what added to the dynamism of worship was the dynamism of fellowship. There was intergenerational fellowship. And I think, one of the things that you say, you drive up streets in Washington and you see, shuttered houses of worship that were previously vibrant places. My Sunday school when I left was as big as the congregation was when I found the whole congregation, right?
Yeah.
And to see some of the older people absolutely beam when it was Youth Sunday and one of the little ones would preach, or one of the little ones would do a solo, or when we had the play, or we had the this or that. You really see the dynamism. What's that wonderful line in scripture? The young ones will dream dreams and the old ones will, see visions, or I probably got that reversed. But when you start to see that interconnectedness, my kids looked around and they knew that was Dr. Hadley, or this was Dr. Jackson, or Dr. So-and-so. But these were the people who were hugging them and giving them peppermint candy. And, and you know, I really, as you can hear, you hear respect in my voice, but you hear lament too, because those days are fleeting. You know, for the places that have that still, those days are maybe numbered.
Oh no, they are numbered, and I don't know if you know. I'm 73 years old, and I see
Are you
the.
really?
I am.
Boy,
I
black
see
don't crack, do it.
black don't crack, but no, but when we go, we go. No, but dropping off a cliff. That's what I said to my daddy one time. He was 75. I turned around, I said, "Whoa, what happened to you?" Anyway, but I lament. You know, I have a very good friend who's 2 years behind me. Was at Morehouse. You know, Ralph Everett, and we talk all the time about the departure of the ancestors. And what does that do? What does that mean for us? Now, I know I'm trying to get your oral history, but I want to raise this with you because you've raised it so eloquently. One of my best friends in the whole wide world, and I never trumpeted it, but it was Vernon Jordan. And he would call me up just to say, let's have breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got sick, his daughter said, I need you to come and talk to him. We would come, we'd pray together. Or he would say to me, oh, I see now, did you send that letter yet? And I said, yes. He said, that's too bad, because if you had called me before you sent, I would have told you, now that you've written it, put it in the trash can. You know what I mean? That kind of wisdom.
Yep.
What are we going to do? I'm the last generation with the living memory of segregation in America.
Yes.
What does that require of me?
Yeah.
And you know, we need to bear witness.
Well, you know, we can take any number of off ramps here. You know, as I mentioned at Ebenezer, especially when we live in a world and a state and a nation that is trying to legislate forgetfulness. You know, my joke is, if you don't want your kids to know you did it, you shouldn't have done it. Because that's what they don't want to remember grandma standing there at the foot of that lynched man. Or grandpa as the one who's spitting on the little kids trying to go to school.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Or Uncle so-and-so setting buses on fire.
Oh,
but they did it.
They did it.
They damn sure did it.
They did it.
And then they went to church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
They damn sure did it. Now I don't think they don't have to be delivered to a pit of fire where there's weeping and gnashing, but you damn sure did it. And my Bible said, if you know the scriptures, you abide in them, the truth will set you free,
Yes.
So it's important, you and those beyond you, really, who can remember those stories, because that is a phase of American. I call it the complicated American family story.
Isn't it?
Complicated.
Oh, and we're not easy people. We know this. We're not easy people. And there are times at St. John's Lafayette Square, I look at our new rector, when our buddy Karen Hasty Williams died, and I looked at him, I said, is this your first time knowing old Black Washington? He looked at me and he said, yes.
Yeah.
Right. I said, old Black Washington is in this room right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. See, you phrased it that way, which I like, but that's what I was saying about those nobles, that royalty. Not all of them were royal, but someone just old. But those people who come out. I remember when I was at St. John the Divine, And when Moran Weston died,
Mm,
um, I remember,
sorry.
yeah, I remember I'm there, little, I was probably still smelling like Almy, it was so new,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and in walks Dick Parsons, and in walks Ken Chenault, Amex and AOL respectively. And they're sort of talking the way me and you talking right now. Two brothers just interacting, stepping out of the wall for a minute just to chat.
Mm-hmm.
And the common to remember, the guy who taught them the game.
Mm-hmm.
Moran, Weston, Carver Savings Bank, and all that sort of stuff. So took them on their first dive into high finance. Little black Episcopal priest.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so we are removed from those folks. My son gets to see me for whatever that's worth, but he's not in the company of some of those, they call it Strivers Row in New York. Those
Yes.
strivers,
Yes.
who, in an unprecedented amount of time, at least professionally, closed the gap of Jim Crow and segregation and enslavement, just leapfrog into the future because of hard work, what I call grit and grace.
Yes. Grit and grace. Woo.
Grit and grace. They had,
yeah.
Anyway, well, you better keep us on track here.
I'm going to get back back on track.
Me and you, I think, could go a while.
I know. This is the problem. Now listen. What happened when there was a vacancy as Bishop of Atlanta?
Yeah.
How did that journey begin with you? And what were some of the factors that led to your answering that call?
To be bishop?
Yes.
So I'm in year 9 at this point, thereabouts, 9 and change at St. Paul's. We had bought property, built this big parking lot. We bought 2 other houses, we moved our offices to a house next door and bought another house for outreach to distribute goods and services to folks. It was all going along, and I've told you about the worship 100 voice choir and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it was just glorious. I look back, maybe I would counsel myself to say, where are you rushing to? But anyway, it was 9 years, and it had been a heavy and good lift. But then I thought to myself, and I had not entertained any other options that whole way long. I mean, I was thoroughly at St. Paul's, thoroughly.
Yes.
My kids were growing up there. We were a family there every Sunday. Just a wonderful, wonderful time in our lives. But you know how these things go. I got to about 9 and I said, I'm either going to double down here and redevelop myself here and figure out some things we need to do going forward, or I'm going to entertain other options. Now, at that time, our then Bishop J. Neil Alexander, had just indicated that he called for the election of the 10th bishop. And immediately I had started to hear from people about, hey, would you think about this? And I was never one of those clergy people who sat around thinking, boy, I look good in a purple shirt. I have respect for the ministry, but I never saw that for myself. It looked constraining to me. And so I wondered about that. And so as the process went on, and they began to develop a profile and began to sort of, solicit names, I had been contacted by a few people, and I said, well, sort of him and hot. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not so sure. And then a gentleman and I was the chair of the COM at the time in the Diocese of Atlanta. And a gentleman who had been on the search committee with me, on the COM rather, with me, was now on the search committee.
Commission of Ministry, yes.
Yeah. And so about 3 days before we were supposed to have all of our paperwork in to be a candidate, the gentleman called me and said, Rob, you've been nominated. And I said, yeah, thank you very much. I had heard. And he said, but we don't have any of your paperwork in. So we've got about 3 days left. And so, well, what are you thinking? Where are you at? I said, well, I don't know. I'm not sure it's a good job. I'm not sure it's a good thing. I don't know. And he said, okay, well, oh, I get it. You just want to talk about discernment at the COM. You don't want to do any. So he sort of lit my ass on fire about that. And, say, I'm convicted, Lord, I am convicted. And so what could one do but to follow up with that? So I put in my information, and because I do believe that the discernment is done in the community.
Yes.
I do believe that. I believe Spirit works through folks.
Right.
And we shouldn't just be waking up on the couch somewhere saying I is or I ain't. It is. We do this in discernment. And so, the rest is history. I put myself forward and said, well, we'll see when the bus stops, right? And as we went along, my energy went up as I had as that process gave me opportunity to talk about what I thought were important things for the church, what I thought were urgent, and now meanwhile, God is a funny God, because God is preparing you all along. Because I also at that point had done any number of clergy retreats around other dioceses. I had been identified as someone who could come and bring an encouraging word to folks, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had practice at talking to clergy and fielding, handling big rooms and, all that sort of stuff. And so it was sort of a familiar thing for me. I was not necessarily intimidated by the thought of the conversations and even the thought of the walkabouts once you become a finalist. And my philosophy was, just tell the truth, and and then we'll see where it goes. So we went to North Georgia and South Georgia, and they asked me about what I thought about gay and lesbian brothers and sisters, and I said, I think that they're wonderful and fine, and I think that one's orientation doesn't qualify or disqualify in them for ordained ministry. What I want to know is, are they called? And so that was a big ticket item then. And again, that was 2012. And, Gene, 2003. Robinson was only about 9 years in the rearview mirror, but it was still tender.
Yeah.
In places. And then they, asked me about guns, and I said, well, I'm ex-military and I was qualified in guns, but I can't think of any good reason why a regular citizen needs an AK-47 or, a war grade weapon. And I thought for sure saying those two things would disqualify me in a lot of quarters. Well, we got to the election, and I had all of the lay votes on the first ballot.
Wow.
This is in Middle and North Georgia.
Wow.
And had all of, and had about maybe a little bit more than half of the clergy votes. And then the clergy started coming to me at that point, and then I was elected on the third ballot.
When did the internal rush begin with you?
The rush? What do you mean by that?
When you realized that it was happening.
Right there. So I was sitting there in the pews, and so we had just had worship, all of the electing council. We had just had worship, and we voted, and it was a little bit of a sort of a floating feeling through all that. And my wife was there in the balcony, and we were in the cathedral, and the dean was a candidate. Sam Candler. And when we got the results, they were read out. My name was last. W is last. So they read them, they read them, they read them, they read them. And then they kept telling you everybody what votes were necessary. And they said Wright in the lay order. Of course, I had already had all of those. And then they said in the clergy order, they said X. And then they said, we have an election. And I would say, you know, that is where I felt like the wind had gone out of me a little bit. That's how I felt. It was unusual. And I had clergy who were sitting around me, clergy colleagues sitting around me, who put their hands on my shoulder, whatever. And then
They lay their hands on you.
yeah, they just put, you know, just not, you know, just to sort of, you know, steady me or, you know, pat me or whatever it was, comfort me, encourage me. And then the president of the standing committee walked down and said, you know, you've been elected. Will you be our bishop? And then walked me up to the front where I greeted the dais and I greeted Bishop Alexander. And then Bishop Alexander said, you know, do you have something to say? Will you address the group? So I walked over to the group. Now I have no speech in my pocket. You know, these guys get up to the Oscar microphone, they pull out a speech, you know, maybe I should have, but I didn't think in those terms. It was not a sure thing as far as I was concerned. And I get up there and I greet everybody in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And I say, what comes to mind for me to say to you is that in the Bible it says, always be ready to give an account of the hope that is in you. And I told him that my hope is in Jesus. And that's all I can really tell you, is that my hope is in Jesus. And I look forward to the opportunity of trying to do some ministry with you in his name. And then my wife came, and I was holding it all together at that point. And then my wife came and I saw her just blubbering, and so I sort of hugged her, and then that just, you know, so, I mean, and then Bishop Alexander did some formalities, and I think we were done at that point. But it was an amazing day. And then oddly anticlimactic. So after we have that great moment and, you know, council's adjourned and the long line of people come and to shake my hand and greet me and all that sort of stuff. Then, you know, Beth and I ultimately end up, getting in the car, and I think we went to Starbucks or something and got some coffee.
Yeah.
And we get to our house, our kids run out. They've heard the news from other relatives who are there. And of course, they don't know what it means. I'm not sure I knew what it means. Yeah. And then as Beth and I are in the house, again, we had no pretense in this. We didn't plan anything. We didn't plan to have people over. Then, you know, one after the other for the next several hours, people showed up at the house.
Wow.
And, some food appeared, and, you know, some libations appeared, and, you know, it was wild. It was a wild 24 hours. Then,
was that a Saturday?
It was, and that's where I'm going next. And so then I have to, you know, I have a job already, so I got to go to St. Paul's on Sunday, and I got 2 sermons to preach. I'm like, Lord. So I'm driving down there, and it's very emotional. And I got there and I said, good morning, as I always say. And I said on yesterday, and I just said back, and they just stood up and just clapped. And if I think about it too hard right now, it will make me emotional.
Yeah,
it will make me emotional. That the people that I wanted to make proud are now proud of me. And I think they had been proud of me previous to that. And I think they would have been proud of me if I had not been elected.
Sure.
I don't know what I said after that to occupy the sermon time.
Yeah.
I just know that something God said, and we ended up at the creed. That's all I know. And that was my 9 o'clock group. And then I got to my 11 o'clock group, and I was a little bit more composed at that point. But it was quite a day.
Yeah.
That was quite a day. I'll never forget that. That was quite a day. And then at the 11, of course, I had the benefit of having my wife there, and having the kids there. So
As you look back on it,
sorry for all the lighting kind of craziness here.
no,
Sun coming in here.
it is a it's a technological necessity to fool around with it, obviously.
Mhm.
Did as you look back on this journey, where you began and where you are, how do you assess it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'm big into the assessing business.
Mhm.
I'll tell, how do I assess what we've done, or just the vocation, or all of that?
All of the above.
Well, where would I start? I think one of the ways that I started off was to distill out of the diocesan profile what I could discern were the 11 deliverables that people wanted, and to begin to make moves in those directions. Because
By 11, what are you talking
well, that's what they had. There was 11 in the
Oh,
profile.
right. Okay.
As I read through the profile, I could enumerate, 11 things that it seemed
Okay.
that the people of God in Middle and North Georgia wanted,
Okay.
that they were hoping for in their next bishop. And so start thinking about those. I had some pretty clear ideas when I went in. The good news for me was I was elected from within, so I didn't necessarily have to get to know this new thing and all these new people. I mean, my clergy colleagues were there, et cetera. You immediately get lonelier upon election because people are trying to reorient themselves to you. I mean, you were once X and now you're Y. And so, you learn a lot about how people do relationship to authority. Most people have really an immature way to deal with authority. They either have to resist it because they're still working out their mommy and daddy stuff. So if you say the sky is blue, they have to disagree with you just because they have to. That's one thing. Or the opposite of that is they have to kiss your ass, because that's the only other way. That's the only other way they know how to deal with authority.
Yeah.
Which is to totally be suck ups.
Mhm.
But so you begin to learn a lot about that. I suppose if I were to stop a minute and think about it, I would have to say that, so Ambassador Andrew Young preached my ordination consecration. And upon accepting that invitation, he said, that's with the condition that you come and spend the day with me the day before. And I was like, sure. He said, we're going to eat some pizza and we're going to talk. When the ancestor speaks, you say, okay.
Absolutely.
So I go down there and, he tells me this wonderful story about his encounter with an Episcopal bishop when Dr. King was in jail in Birmingham, out of which comes a letter from the Birmingham jail.
One of the moderate white clergy.
Right. And where Dr. King uses the word disappointed.
Yes.
10 times.
Yes.
I never
Thank you.
I never knew that until I did a study here with that. And I had never, and I circled them all.
Oh, I got my assignment today.
I think it's 10, Riley. I think it's 10.
Well, no matter what, I mean, he uses it.
It was again and again and again. And I was like, wow. I mean, the one that people really remember is that when he says that I am a grandson and son of a clergyman. How else could I be? I mean, are you disappointed in the thing because you love it?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's the one that people remember, but he peppers the thing with disappointment all along.
Oh.
And of course, 2 Episcopal bishops signed the letter that prompted the letter from the Birmingham jail.
Yeah.
One was Bishop Carpenter and the other one is, anyway. So Martin's in jail, but Martin gives Andy an assignment. And he says, don't you know somebody in Birmingham that you can get some talks going? And he sends Andy out. Now, Andy at that point is the young guy,
Yeah.
He's not as young as John, but he's the young guy.
Yeah, yeah.
John Lewis.
Yeah.
So Andy says, wait a minute. Yeah, I went to some kind of youth camp or something with somebody, the white person. So let me try if I can find them. So he finds them. And so through back channels, Andy ends up in a talk with a representative from Bishop Carpenter, the white Bishop Carpenter, the Episcopal Bishop of Alabama, with their person. And so Carpenter can't be seen with King. King can't be seen with Carpenter, but they're working back channels.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy told me that story. And he went on to say, people went to their grave thinking that Carpenter was an unrepentant racist. And another part of Birmingham went to their grave thinking that Carpenter was an unrepentant progressive or liberal. And Andy said, so what I'm telling you is just go ahead and do what you got to do as the bishop. Don't worry about what people are going to say about you. Just go ahead and do what you're going to do. And in a weird way, that simple story, I have gone back to it again and again and again. Because, and I have used as an indicator of being on the right path, that if the left is hating on me and the right is hating on me simultaneously, then I actually might be doing something. So that's one evaluative tool that I have used. And then one of the things I have learned over the years to say is through the course of a day, am I doing only what the Bishop of Atlanta can do? If I'm only doing what the Bishop of Atlanta can do on any given day, then I'm probably doing what is right to do. So I can call the governor, I can call Senator Warnock, I can do this, I can do that. I can call Barbara Brown Taylor and say, hey, I need you to show up on a podcast. I can call Michael Curry. And those phone calls might not get returned by other folks. There are things that are for me to do. And if I can stay on those and widen those appropriately, that's probably what I'm supposed to be doing. If I'm tempted to sort of be the canon for the ordinary, or be the canon for congregational vitality, I'm probably not living up to the call that's uniquely mine.
Well, I don't understand. What do you mean?
Well, I mean to say, well, it has to do with sort of my philosophy of things. So when I first started off, people would plop down in my office and ask me, what do you think, Bishop? And I had to reverse the trajectory of that. I said, well, look, I'm paying you a lot of good green money. Your job is to sit down in this chair and say, Bishop, this is the issue. And this is my recommendation. What say you? And so we had to reverse all of that. And that, I think, is what kills a lot of bishops right now, is they get seduced into being the answer man or the answer woman. And I think that is not the best way to approach the work. I think the best way to approach the work is to buy as much smart as you can buy and get yourself surrounded with that, which keeps you at a certain level of contribution, right? So it's my job to make decisions at nail biter intersections, and it's my job about certain things. But it is as informed by my canon staff and as informed by the the Commission on Ministry. But this notion of partnership and leadership is important to me. But I think it's predicated upon, at least in my view, of me having a clear idea of what my contribution, my unique contribution is to the conversation.
Okay. How do you determine at critical points that you are close to doing the right thing? I won't put you on the spot and say that that you're doing the right thing, but where do you get the comfort enough?
Yeah. Well, what's hilarious about me is that people think I'm so progressive or I'm this or that. What they don't know is that I'm pretty orthodox. So one of the ways that I know that I'm doing sort of what I should be doing is if I'm tracking with the ministry of the bishop as it's outlined in the Book of Common Prayer.
Yeah.
And so what I think we do, we don't do sometimes, is that so for instance, I put a lot of emphasis on teaching as a bishop. I've been bishop now 10 years. I've written every week. I have a meditation every week for 10 years.
Yeah.
There's nobody in the House of Bishops that's done that.
Yeah.
So that's because part of my ministry is teaching. And so that comes out of the Book of Common Prayer. I teach at Emory now, and I've taught at other places as adjunct. And I'll deepen that and continue to do that because that is the ministry of the bishop, is to teach and to form. We're doing a podcast, more than 100,000 downloads, 27 cities, 27 countries, 700 cities, because the ministry of the bishop is about the proclamation of Jesus Christ. Didn't say that I'm limited to one mechanism. It just said proclamation. So,
yes,
I think our Book of Common Prayer is assuming that we're smart and trying to hit a need. So those are the examples I would say. How do I know that I'm doing right is when I think I'm tracking. There's nothing that I have done that people want to label progressive that is not squarely situated in scripture or tradition. We started the Absalom Jones Center for Racial Reconciliation and Healing here, the only standalone program like this in the entire church. Have served more than 60 dioceses, have written the only curriculum in the church for young people wanting to get a sense of what does it mean to be beloved community and anti-racists. That is a direct, sort of outpouring from what we say in the baptismal covenant.
Oh, respect the dignity of every single human being. Right.
But when you fall into sin, will you repent and return to the Lord? I mean, it's right there. And so, I think that is sort of what we ought to be doing. So that is how you handle the criticism also, is because you realize that you are standing in something. When we just had COVID, obviously, and maybe we're still back in it. I just heard about a new variant coming over from Europe today.
Yeah.
And people wondered, how do we make the decisions we made? How do we implement the protocols that we made about masking and vaccination and moving online, et cetera? Well, we say we're a church that makes decisions based on a three-legged stool.
Yes.
Scripture, tradition, and reason. Well, reason has to do with logic, and logic is about science.
Yes.
So that's how we incorporate science into our determinations. So for the people who say, well, I love Jesus and I don't have to get a vaccine or a mask, that's foolishness. I want to use the mind that God gave me.
Exactly.
You wear your seatbelt,
Right, exactly.
So I guess that's how I know. That's how I know. Other matters, for instance, like when we do discernment, people want to come forward to give them, offer themselves as ordained people. We run a fairly significant battery of clinical tests and evaluations.
Yes.
Because this work is so important and so difficult. And so, when the clinician evaluates, they give you 5 as the most fit and sort of 0 as the least fit. Well, one of the things that I did was I moved that number up. We were taking previously 3 with an explanation, and I moved us to 4 and 5 exclusively.
Yes.
Because, and that I make that call because it's my job as the bishop to protect the people of God, and also protect the soul that's going to give themselves to do, exercise leadership in that way. And so I know I'm right by to make that door more narrow and to make people more fit for the work. I know I'm right in doing that. And that's my judgment, which is given uniquely to the bishop. And, that's I have to deal with the positive consequences of that and the negative consequences of that, but that's why they call it leadership.
Yeah. I don't want to hold you too long, but a couple more questions if you don't mind.
Okay, let's see
What do your detractors say?
Oh, I mean, the detractors over the years have wondered, when we went through all of that, George Floyd stuff.
Yes.
And when we made mandatory all of the beloved community training as a part of being eligible to run a rector's search, people didn't like that. People didn't like me. We had said it out loud, but I made sure that we had teeth in it. So if people would not do the trainings that would save church and all that, if they would not do those things, and if they would not do the reconciliation stuff, and also some work around gender, so as to be able to say that they would consider all kinds of leadership for the church, then you're not eligible as far as I'm concerned. And people didn't like that, but that's the law in the Diocese of Atlanta now. You are not eligible for a rector unless you comply with those trainings, and you don't have to. I tell people you don't have to, but enjoy your interim. Yeah. That's what you got. And that, to me, that's about spiritual formation. I'm not trying to be a despot here, but that is about either we believe it or not.
Right.
Do we believe it or do we not?
Right.
And maybe you'd be more comfortable in another church.
Right.
That doesn't hold itself to those kinds of standards. I have talked boldly about politics. The gospel is political. It's not partisan, however. So I'm going to talk about politics. I'm going to talk about politics that betray the baptismal covenant. That's my job. And I'm going to talk about poverty in rural white places, and I'm going to talk about poverty in in urban Black places. And so, I guess maybe the consistent criticism I've gotten is he's too political. And and so what that engenders in me is to make sure that I am faithful when I speak, to our baptismal covenant, and not, regurgitating some version of any political talking points, for one party or the other. So I think that's how you try to stay right. And, you apologize when you need to apologize. I've learned an awful lot by trying to have these conversations across Middle and North Georgia, in very volatile political times. You learn from other people. And you learn that a lot of people are really afraid. They think they're making really good political decisions, but they're just terribly afraid.
Of what?
Well, this America is going to look very different. So, for instance, in Georgia, Black and brown live births, right, have superseded white live births. And if I remember my civics class, the democracy is based on how many votes you get, in one direction or the other. And so there's some political skullduggery happening because they see the math. And so this is happening all over the country. They're constraining the office of Secretary of State in lots of places, Georgia as well.
Yes.
because if you can't beat them, cheat. And I don't think that it's democratic to say that or Republican to say that. I think it's a betrayal of what we say our American values are. So I'm going to talk about that. And, but we try to talk about it in ways that don't condemn or shame. Because I think that, Stevie Wonder, one of our great theologian, Stephen Morris, Stevie Wonder said that you ought to turn your words into truth. And then
Yes.
turn that truth into love.
We also pray in the baptismal liturgy to give the baptized an inquiring and discerning
heart. Yeah. Yeah.
So we always have to ask the questions.
Well, you do. And, maybe to put a cap on that last piece, how, have you analyzed your work or evaluated your work? I think the role of continuing education in my ordained life, and particularly in my episcopate, has been central for me. In other words, to keep on learning.
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about asking questions, I took a class at the beginning of COVID at MIT at the Sloan School around leadership as inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
And that really helped me to understand what the role of the bishop really is.
Mm-hmm.
Sacramental piece and all that, of course, we know that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But this other piece is that asking those questions, becoming a better question maker than an answer giver, is, I think, your real add value to the system. And so with the heft of the formal authority entrusted to me, I can ask my system, I can ask congregations, I can ask diocesan structure particular questions. Not that I have the answers to them, but somebody's got to tend to that. And I think that when everybody in the culture is tending to that, that's great. But the person with the formal authority, if they're tending to that, then you really create a possibility, right, for new answers, which of course is progress.
It is indeed. What do we do about, and I know we got to go, about our people who are unchurched? I have one of the challenges I think I have is that I have so many Black friends of great achievement, high intelligence, who are unchurched, and at the end of their lives, they said, "Can we use your church for the service?"
Right.
And I said, "Yes, but we have to have the liturgy." "What is that?" they say.
Yeah.
"I am resurrection and I am life," says the Lord. They said, "No, thank you."
Yeah, those are not easy questions. And, I think some of us are tempted to answer those questions with policy. And I understand that. I really, really do. My heart is softened a little bit on answering those kinds of questions, or as life has gone on. We're also the church that prays, Lord, there is a faith known only to you.
Yes. There
is, and so it puts one at an intersection, doesn't it? And this is where I think I want a pastor, not a policy, in those moments. Now there are no doubt, and I've experienced this, people for whom the right answer is that, well, this is what we do. And if that is not acceptable to you, then with love and grace, there's a church across the street or down the block or whatever it is, and God bless. But there are other people for whom we can offer that liturgy with an explanation, maybe with a cup of coffee, and help them, even in the last chapter, understand that that you've had a life with God. You may have bucked at the language, but you've had a life with God. And that, those real opportunities come with a certain amount of sensitivity applied at critical intersections. I mean, life is hard, man. And some people, nobody could preach them to that intersection where they really want to entertain what is the meaning of life, who is this God, and what do we owe each other. But cancer can get you to that intersection.
Oh, in a heartbeat.
Divorce can get you to that intersection.
Yes. The loss of a child.
Oh,
Woo.
can get you to that intersection real damn quick.
Oh, and leave you there.
And then, so then I'm not sure 2 sentences of policy on the website is the ticket.
Yeah.
Then I think I want to enter into something with this person and figure out how can we, isn't that the gospel movement and trajectory? All these people that Jesus could have wrote off with a real terse policy get included. He stops for the kid. Well, we could have had a no kid policy. He stops for the woman by the well. Well, we could have had a no 3 marriage policy. No dinner with tax collectors because we got a no dinner with tax collectors policy.
Mm-hmm.
No Pharisees after 6 o'clock at night, and then Nicodemus would have been cut out.
The thing about when I look at someone in a recent past who has shown the capacity to change, and people haven't taken him up on it, to change the way we view hope, the way we view love. I think of a Trayvon Martin, whose friend Rachel Gentile got on the stand and was put down because she was fat, she was dark, she was shiny, she was wearing big gold jewelry, and she didn't speak the King's English, but someone asked her the question.
Yeah.
Why were you friends? Tell us about your friendship. And she said very calmly, well, Trayvon never laughed at me.
Wow.
Not many people remember that. It stopped me in my tracks. Someone who saw beyond all of that, to see her humanity, is not a thug.
Wow.
But was a child of God.
Wow.
Who understood what love was all about.
Wow. What was her name?
Rachel Gentile. Gentel, I believe.
We have this wonderful, wonderful gospel coming up on, is it Sunday? Or maybe Saturday. I do a confirmation on Saturday. I got them confused. Mm-hmm. It is 2 men went into the synagogue to pray. That's one of my favorite gospels.
Yes.
And one gave Jesus, one gave God a great list of his spiritual accomplishments. And one man couldn't even look up.
Yeah.
One man couldn't even look. I might mess around like that, because at the end of that, she said, he was my friend. He never laughed at me. And we never laughed at me. We can come to Jesus with all the stuff because he won't ever laugh at us.
He won't laugh at us. He loves us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we will find him in Galilee, as he told us. And it is not a place on a map. And with that,
I don't know what we accomplished today, but we sure had some fellowship.
We did. But we also got, I believe, when you see the transcript, and I hope that you will agree, It was a remarkable conversation because you have talked about and shared your spiritual journey, what you hope to accomplish, what you have accomplished, but you have put it in terms of your own, the way the Holy Spirit has worked in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the vocation, right? I mean, you know, Will Willimon says one of the saddest ways to live is to live an unsent life, to live like your life is your possession
Oh,
and not God's possession,
yeah.
that God is hoping and waiting for you to offer it to God. He said the saddest thing that you can live, the saddest way to live as a Christian is to live an unsent life.
Mm.
And he's right. And I think part of trying to live a sent life, and I hope I have, is that one of the collateral benefits of that, direct benefits of that, consequences of that, is a spiritual formation life. And so I think that's what has happened really to me, is that from the time I walked into, you know, beforehand to large degree, but by the time I walked into St. George's Episcopal Church, at the invitation of Linda Talton, and was delivered into the hands of Vincent Harris, Father Vincent Harris.
Mhm.
You know, that it has been unfolding. One of my favorite Bible verses that try to articulate this unfolding in my journey is Ephesians 3:20. God can do infinitely more than you can ask, imagine, or think,
Mhm.
according to the faith at work,
Mhm.
you know, in you. And so for some reason or the other, this notion of a God who can do more than we can ask or imagine, but in partnership with the faith that we actually possess, is just an amazing thought. And I think I think I'm a living testimony to that. Little boy born in an orphanage, and here I am now. People pay me to ask me what I think, and what I try to keep telling them is I think God is amazing. That's my story. I think God is amazing, and I just that's all I really can say. God is really, really amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop.
Well, God
It-
bless. I look forward to the transcript.
Yeah, this has been a joy. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Have a great rest of the day. Okay.
Thank you. You too.
We'll talk again.
All right.
All right, bro.
Take care.
Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye.